Great. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, source of life, our God, who makes us holy through your mitzvot. Has given us the mitzvah of engaging in words of Torah. We have now, as we continue on the annual cycle, reached the end of the book of Exodus. And the Torah portions are a double portion this week, Vayak'hel and Pekudei, the last 6 chapters of the book of Exodus. And just for those unfamiliar, the reason it's a double portion is because the Jewish year is a lunar solar year. And so occasionally we add a leap month to the lunar year so that it catches up with the solar year. And that's why we need, and during a leap year, where we add a whole month of Shabbat, we need extra Torah portions. So these Torah portions are bunched together during non-leap years so that we can break them out during leap years so that there's a Torah reading for every week during a leap year. Next year will be a leap year, starting in next Rosh Hashanah. So Vayak'hel and Pekudei are the golden calf debacle was last week, last portion, and now that the relationship has between God and the children of Israel has been sufficiently restored with the second tablets and the renewal of the covenant, now comes the business, the activity, the work of building a dwelling place for God in their midst. And that was the initial instruction back in chapter 25 when Moses goes up the mountain in Parshat Truma, and God says to Moses, have the people give gifts to the sanctuary, all whose heart moves them, and make me a mishkan, make me a dwelling place that I might dwell within you. And then now's the time to actually make it. And the book of Exodus ends on a real completed note, because at the very end in chapter 40, Moses erects the Mishkan, the presence of God descends upon it and fills it, and therefore the children of Israel are reunited with the divine presence. I've taught these portions a lot, and this material will be familiar to some of you, but I always come back to the same, for me, rather amazing literary qualities and construction of the books that reinforce the whole thrust and the whole theme of the Torah, which is how do humans make a dwelling place for God in our midst. And so some of these things that I'll say will be familiar to some of you, and I'm going to take a deep dive into the structure of the language and how it reflects that. And again, I'm going to thank Rabbi Jonathan Sachs's erudite commentary for pointing me in certain directions. And excuse me, springtime, the office is actually warm. There. See, I have my work clothes on. I've been wearing them for 12 months now. Okay, so I'm going to be ranging all over the place here. I don't know how much I'll be able to squeeze into this hour, but I do suspect and hope that you'll get a picture of the, to the casual reader, the unseen deep structure of the Torah that draws our attention in ways that may even be subliminal to the themes that the Torah wants us to be hearing, the repetition of words and of themes that kind of echo and reverberate through the text. So the first beautiful reverberation is that this Torah portion is called Vayak'hel, which means, and Moses assembled. So the word kahal, kuf he lamed, means a community. A kehillah is a congregation. We're a kehilat lev shalem, the congregation of the full heart. So let me share the text with you. Vayak'hel Moshe et kol adat b'nei Yisrael. And Moses assembled, kahal. Now, that's an interesting word. It doesn't come up much. We don't hear that word very often in the Torah for Moses speaking to the children of Israel. It turns out that in, hold on, let me find the citation. Like I said, I've got a lot of stickies in my Tanakh today. Yes, chapter 32. In last week's portion, and I'm going to, I see, this is a little challenging. Hold on. Okay, I'm just going to read it to you. In last week's portion, it says, at the beginning of the golden calf episode, when the people saw that Moses was so long in coming down from the mountain, Vayak'hel ha'am ala Haron. They gathered, same word, unusual word, they gathered themselves against Aaron. And so there's some kind of, there's, in Torah, I'm absolutely persuaded now that choice of words is intentionally supposed to, Moses is doing now something to repair the previous Yikahel, where the people gathered themselves against Aaron and then produced the golden calf. He is now gathering them, convoked the whole Israelite community in order to now create the Mishkan. So just as the first Yikahel 3 chapters ago marks the moment of the dissolution of the covenantal relationship between the people and God, Moses now uses the same word to restore, litaken, to repair, to rebuild that relationship with the Creator, because the children of Israel, God wants them to be in this sacred relationship with Him. And so just that word Vayak'hel and Vayak'hel jump out of the text when you do a very close reading. Now, in addition, here in chapter 35, the very next thing that gets mentioned, on 6 days work may be done, but on the 7th you shall have a Shabbat of complete rest, holy to the Lord. Whoever does any work on it shall be put to death. Okay, we don't have to dive into that. It's like, it's the death of something, clearly. If this pattern of 6 days of work and the 7th day of rest is not followed in the holy work of creating a dwelling place for God. Back in chapter 32, I'm sorry. Yeah, back in chapter 32 in the Golden Calf episode, just previous to where it says, and the people Yikahel. Here, let me go to chapter 32. Oh, I see what I have to do. There we go. Now I can manipulate the text. Here's the word Vayak'hel. The people gathered against Aaron. Well, what happens right before then? 6 days may work be done, but on the seventh day there shall be a Sabbath of complete rest, holy to the Lord. Whoever does work on the Sabbath day shall be put to death. Okay, exact same sentence. So none of this you recognize is accidental, but rather the work of a literary poet who wants you to hear it again. And so these are the resonances and the repetitions, which when I was a child were boring repetitions. Come on, let's get on with the story. It was like boring. That now that I understand how to look at literary structure and poetic structure becomes interesting to me. So right before the golden calf episode, Shabbat is invoked. And then, listen to this language. Vayitena Moshe, then God gave, and there's Vishamru, right? The Israelite people shall keep the Sabbath, observing it throughout the ages as a covenant for all times. The Sabbath is the symbol of our sacred relationship with creation itself. If we do not observe this sacred cycle, the whole Torah bases the sacred relationship on the number 7. Why? I don't know. There's lots of wonderful speculations about why this number 7 becomes the organizing principle of the covenantal relationship we have with God. But I don't know why, but it is. So it shall be a sign for all time. This is Vishamru, everybody, those who know it. Vishamru v'nei Yisrael. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, and on the 7th day God ceased from work. Vayom hashvi'i shavat vayinafash. And then, when God finished speaking with Mount Sinai, he gave Moses the 2 tablets of the pact. Okay, and Vayitena Moshe kechaloto l'daber ito. Now, lechalot is an important word. It means to finish or complete, because it's going to come up a lot. Vayechulu hashamayim v'haaretz v'chol tzva'am. And God completed the work of making heaven and earth. So this is also an echo, which I'll get to in a little bit. There we go. Okay. So Shabbat is invoked. And then this word Vayak'hel, but in reverse order, right? And that's a typical biblical structure. A-B, B-A. That's often, so often how it gets structured. So now let me go back to chapter. One more thing I wanted to show you. Right before Shabbat, we learn about Betzalel. See, I have singled out by name Betzalel, son of Uri, son of Hur, the tribe of Judah, and I have endowed him with a divine spirit of skill, ability, and knowledge in every kind of craft. So way back in chapter 31, we hear about Betzalel. And then I think, why are we hearing about Betzalel now? Because where Betzalel becomes really important is in chapter 35. It says, and Moses kahal Vayak'hel, the children of Israel, and told them, 6 days may you work, and then says, this is what the Lord has commanded. Take from among you gifts to the Lord, truma, truma. Truma is a beautiful word, everyone, by the way, because it comes from the verb leharim. Anyone go to camp or day school? Larim tayad? Raise your hand. Yeah, that's where it comes from. Romamu, lift up. So a truma, which is understood to be a gift, something you, but it comes from the root, something you raise up, which is just a beautiful word. You raise it up before God. I really like that word. And then here are the different kinds. Yes, Aviva Zornberg talked at length about observing Sabbath together with the building of the tabernacle. And Aviva Zornberg's talking about it because the Talmud spends 200 pages talking about it. So Aviva Zornberg and you and I are going right into the heart of exegesis on the Torah, going back thousands of years. These descriptions of the gifts are a repetition of the original descriptions of the gifts. And then it says, sorry, let me just get to the verse. Oh yes, here it is. After description of all the things that are to be brought, it says, and Moses said to the Israelites, see, the Lord is singled out by name Bezalel, son of Uri, son of Hur of the tribe of Judah. He has endowed him with a divine spirit of skill, ability, and knowledge in every kind of craft. And so he's going to be the main craftsman. So the reason I'm showing that to you, and if I'd had more time to prepare today, I would have created a whole sheet so you could see it, and I apologize for that actually, is that you see the ABC, CBA structure, which tells you that the golden calf episode is supposed to be connected to this building of the Mishkan episode. What was deconstructed by the Israelites in the golden calf episode is now being reconstructed. And the language supports all of that. Moses, through his incredible efforts, has spent most of Ki Tisa convincing God not to abandon or destroy the children of Israel, persuading the children of Israel to hang in there, and bringing them back together again, so that this tenuous work of making a community in which God's presence can dwell can be fulfilled. And certainly at the end of the book of Exodus, when the Shekhinah comes down and rests upon the children of Israel, we have a beautiful conclusion of the book of Exodus, which is when we begin the book of Exodus, as you recall, the children of Israel are enslaved and they cry out to God. And God remembers, it says. And the action of the book of Exodus is set into motion through the slaves crying out. And here, at the end of a very eventful novel, right? My goodness, think about all the action in the book of Exodus. Here at the very end, there is a moment that is a happy ending, a conclusion. Exodus becomes a literary unit. I'm sure you understand what I'm saying. However, in addition to that, and as we've taught in other years, Genesis and Exodus create a literary unit, an arc of story. And this is where the language becomes really cool, really involved. So, for example, let's look at sevens for a moment. If you think here, I'll stop sharing the screen for a minute. When you look at Genesis chapter 1, it's filled with, it establishes the template of 7 as the number to look out for that will tell you that you are aligned with the nature of creation, with God's work, with God's self. The world is created in 7 days, 6 days of labor by God, and on the 7th day, rest. But those nudniks like myself who like to count words and letters, the sevens are everywhere. So, as some of you might know, the word good, and God looked at what God has made, and behold, it was good, appears 7 times in chapter 1, in the creation story at the beginning of Genesis. And then, of course, the 7th time it says very good. That's the 7th one. The first sentence of the book of the Torah, Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz, has 7 words. The second verse has 14 words. The word aretz, earth, appears in that chapter 21 times. The word Elohim appears in that chapter 35 times. And the final 3 verses, Vayak'helu hashamayim v'haaretz v'chol tzva'am, and the work of heaven and earth was completed, has 35 words, and so on. I don't believe it's an accident. I think that's ridiculous at this point. This is a holy text that scribes and interpreters labored over for who knows how long. And the patterns in it are there to call to us. If you're looking for sevens, you're looking in the right direction. So it turns out that frequently in the Torah, the key word of a passage will be repeated 7 times. And if you read the passage and you look at the key word, frequently it'll be there 7 times. So when we look at our portion of this week, for example, I'm actually going to share the screen again. In this passage of chapter 35, let me get back to the beginning of it. There we go. This is our week's portion. It begins with Moses gathered the people. Then it describes the prohibition against working on Shabbat, which makes it clear that if you're going to do this holy work, then you must follow the template that God followed during the creative process and not work ceaselessly, but pause every 7th day or month or year and reflect on what you have been doing. Appreciate it, enjoy it, step back from your canvas, take a sabbatical. That's where the word comes from. And then, here are the 7s. The word is lev, heart. And it starts here. Chu meitchem truma l'Adonai, kol nediv libo. Everyone whose heart so moves him. Okay, now in this next passage, the word heart is going to be repeated 7 times. Interestingly, it's going to be repeated with different adjectives. Is that the right word? Nadiv lev. Anyway, yeah, different descriptives. Nadiv libo means generous of heart. Heart so moves him. L'nadev is to volunteer in modern Hebrew. It's voluntary. It's from your heart. And then it says in verse, and here are all the things to bring. And then it says in verse 10, V'chol chacham lev. And let all among you who are skilled, but those who know Hebrew know that chacham lev means wise of heart. So we've got generous of heart, wise of heart, and then here are the things that are to be made. And then it says, and let all who are nisa'o libo. There's lev again. Now, again, our translator, unfortunately, this is one of the times when I think the Jewish Publication Society translator just misses the crucial poetry of the Hebrew. Because, yes, nisa'o libo, excelled in ability. What does laseit mean? It means to uplift. Everyone whose heart is uplifted. Okay, so we have those three adjectives: generous of heart, wise of heart, uplifted of heart. And then here's the fourth one. Oh, and then nadvarucho, whose spirit is generous. And so those are the three: nadiv, chacham, nasa. And then we look at verse 22, and he calls the men and the women now, specifically, all whose hearts moved them. Nadiv. Then in 25, V'chol isha chochmat lev. And all the skilled women, all the women who are wise of heart. And then in the next verse, V'chol hanashim asher nasa liban. Those who know Hebrew, we're in the feminine now. And all the women whose hearts were uplifted. So very interestingly, we have three levs pertaining to the men: Nadiv lev, Chacham lev, and then Nas Ulipo. And now we have three specifically to the women: Nadiv lev, Chochmat lev, and Nasa liban. That's six. And then there's the coda. Kol ish ve'isha asher nadav libam. Every man and woman whose heart moved them. And that's the end of that literary package, because now we go right into the description of Betzalel. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing in a minute so I can see you again. I hope you're finding this as cool as I'm finding it. It's like sometimes a really close reading of Torah like this, what's the word I'm looking for? Validates our intuitions about, say, what it takes to build a house for God. But not only validates that, it's all-inclusive. It's specifically all-inclusive in this case, which is rather unusual in the Torah to include men and women by gender, so specifically. It's 7 times of hearts being uplifted, generous. It's ABC, ABC, and then, so it's Nadav, Chacham, Nasa, Nadav, Chochmat, Nasa, Nadav. So number 7 is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I really like that. Roni says, do you think, Rabbi, it is your analysis in careful literary criticism and reading, or have others validated this 7 repeat of heart's condition? Oh, no, I'm not, I'm not a genius. I'm getting this from other sources. But I went ahead, and then when they said, oh, by the way, this is repeated 7 times, I said, oh, I gotta look. And then what I'll take credit for is that none of the readers I read noticed the alternating pattern of adjectives, which just strengthens the case. So I saw that. Okay. I'm not going to get to all my exciting insights today, but so there's the 7. It takes hearts that are uplifted, wise, and generous from everyone in 7 times in order to build the sanctuary. There are other places where we have 7 repeats, and I won't go into them in as close detail. In this next section, there's another 7. The word truma is repeated 7 times, offering in another section. But I think we should get into chapter 39 and 40, because that's where the 7s really reach their pitch. And let me share the screen again. Let me go to chapter 39. And here's the phrase. Now, of the blue, purple, and crimson yarns, they also made the service vestments for officiating the sanctuary, and they made Aaron's sacral vestments, as the Lord had commanded Moses. This translation uses Lord. Let me read Paul's comment. Avi Zornberg refers to the prohibition of use of fire on Sabbath as it pertains to fires within the heart, individual flames of ego during the week that don't slow on Sabbath. Instead, during rest of Sabbath, can allow full divine heart to be expressed. He also is example of the result of this process. Well said. Okay, so what the Mishkan is a microcosm of creation. When we watched Rabbi from the Aleph Beta program, David Foreman's beautiful cartoon a few weeks ago, we saw how just as God made a house for us, we live in God's house. Ashrei yoshvei veitecha. We live in God's house. We have to make a dwelling place for God. And that is the definition of a microcosm. The Mishkan is a symbolic microcosm. It's intended that way. And the Mishkan represents not only the cosmos, but the expanse, the sort of infinities within our own hearts. And so for instance, when Aaron consecrates God's altar in a few weeks from now, Aaron brings fire, but a fire comes down from heaven and consumes the offering. That's God's fire. So if we keep bringing our fire all 7 days of the week, we're not going to make any space for this divine experience on Shabbat, where we remember where all of our fire comes from. That's what we're getting to. Yes, and Betzalel is an example of the expression of divine heart. And as I've taught, and you can read about in my book, Betzalel's name means Betzel El, in the image of God. So Betzalel isn't a guy whose parents like the name, right? Betzalel is the archetypal human who manifests and realizes the divine potential within them. Betzalel has been inspired with divine wisdom, grace, and knowledge. And that means Betzalel fulfills Betzalel's name as being made in God's image. So in this section, thanks for mentioning that, Paul, everything that we're saying needs to be understood metaphorically. This is a metaphorical house for God. And we make it in ourselves, in our communities, in our homes. That's how we do it. So in this chapter, Aaron's vestments, all the getup that Aaron wears, is created by Betzalel. And after each section, it says, as the Lord had commanded Moses, Ka'asher tziva Adonai et Moshe. Here's the next one. They make the ephod, Ka'asher tziva Adonai et Moshe. They make the precious stones, Ka'asher tziva Adonai et Moshe. Here are all the names of the precious stones that he wears on his chest. And so that's a long section. And they made it Ka'asher tziva Adonai et Moshe, as the Lord had commanded Moses. And sure enough, they make the robe Ka'asher tziva Adonai et Moshe. They make the tunic Ka'asher tziva Adonai et Moshe. They make the headpiece Ka'asher tziva Adonai et Moshe. And then it says, and that's the 7. And then it says, Vayak'hel kol avodat hamishkan, ohel moed, vaya'asu b'nei Yisrael kechol asher tziva Adonai et Moshe, kain asu. Okay, now let's remember the language of the Kiddush in Genesis chapter 1. I'm going to go to it. Let's see, how do I get out of here? What an amazing tool. Vayechulu hashamayim v'haaretz v'chol tzva'am. And what did we just read in the Hebrew? Let me just read it to you rather than keep switching the screen. Vayak'hel kol avodat mishkan vaya'asu b'nei Yisrael kechol asher asa vayachal Elohim bayom hashvi'i melachto asher asa vayishbot bayom hashvi'i mikol melachto asher asa. On the 7th day, God finished the work that God had been doing. He ceased on the 7th day from all the work that he had done. So that word asu, asher asa, they did, kain asu, it was done. And God does it not according to God's own plan and word. We also do it in this chapter 39 according to God's word. And then it says in verse 43, Vayar Moshe et kol hamelacha v'hinei asu ota kasher tziva Adonai kain asu vayvarech otam Moshe. And when Moses saw that they had performed all the tasks as the Lord had commanded, so they had done, Moses blessed them. Now I hear 2 resonances in this, and again, I thank Rabbi Jonathan Sachs for pointing me in this direction. Moses has reconnected the people with God, they've successfully accomplished it, and so now Moses blesses them. After what Moses did to them a few chapters ago, if you're gonna punish them by grinding up the golden calf and making them drink it, then when they do something right, you better bless them. That was just one thing. But I want to go all the way back to chapter 1 of Genesis. Because those who know the Kiddush, if you grew up with it, you'll know this language. Vayar, and Moses saw, et kol hamelacha asher asu, and Moses saw, vayvarech otam Moshe. Let's go back to chapter 1. It left me in the right place. Vayar Elohim et kol asher asa. And God saw everything that God had made. V'hinei tov ma'od, and it was very good. Vayivarech Elohim et yom hashvi'i. And God blessed the seventh day. Kivo Shabbat mikol melachto asher bara Elohim la'asot. So Moses surveys the work of the Israelites, and behold, it is very good. Why? Because it's in the way God, it was in the blueprint that God, as it were, had given them. And God and Moses blesses the people. Paul says, if God finished on the seventh day, does that mean he did some work on the seventh day? That question gets asked all the time, Paul. And that's why there's also a midrash about how on twilight, on the eve of Shabbat, right before Shabbos came, God made 10 miraculous things, the mouth of the ass that talked to, so yeah, have some fun with that. Okay, so God blesses Shabbat, Moses blesses the people, and there's one more blessing I want to show you here. And God created the Adam in God's image. In the image of God, God created them. Male and female, God created them. Vayivarech otam Elohim. And God blessed them and said, be fertile and multiply. Okay. So there's that resonance. And now there's one more that I want to share with you, which is that. So we had 7 repetitions of doing it exactly as God said. And then we get to chapter 40. And in chapter 40, where's my notes? The phrase that gets repeated 7 times, because now it's time for Moses to set up the dwelling place for God. On the first day of the month, you shall set up the tabernacle of the tent of meeting and bring everything in and place it there, etc., etc. Dress Aaron in the sacred vestments, wash them with the water, anoint them, get it all ready. And then it says, Vayas Moshe kechol asher tziva Adonai oto kein asa. This Moses did, just as the Lord had commanded him, so he did. And here we go. He spread the tent over the tabernacle, just as the Lord had commanded Moses. Kasher tziva Adonai et Moshe. He brought the ark inside the tabernacle, just as the Lord had commanded Moses. He put the table in, just as the Lord had commanded Moses. He lit the lamps, just as the Lord had commanded Moses. He placed the altar of gold, just as the Lord had commanded Moses. And he put up the screen, just as the Lord had commanded Moses. And he washed Aaron's hands and feet, just as the Lord had commanded Moses. And he set up the enclosure and put up the screen, Vayak'hel Moshe et hamlacha. And now that was 7 times. And now we are at the end of the book of Exodus. And what is the word we hear? Vayak'hel Elohim bayom hashvi'i et kol melachto asher asa. And God completed on the 7th day the work that God had done. Vayak'hel Moshe et hamlacha. And Moses completed the work, and the cloud covered the tent of meeting, and the presence of the Lord filled the tabernacle. Moses could not enter the tent of meeting because the cloud had settled upon it, and the presence of the Lord filled the Mishkan. And when the cloud lifted from the tabernacle, the Israelites would set out on their various journeys. But if the cloud did not lift, they would not set out until such time as it did lift. For over the tabernacle, a cloud of the Lord rested by day, and fire would appear in it by night. In the eyes of all of the children, house of Israel, throughout their journeys. It's so beautiful ending, the reunion. Chazak, chazak, that's what we say when we finish a book. Be strong, and we'll strengthen each other. So the arc of the beginning, chapter 1 of Genesis, somehow has now been fulfilled. We haven't come for a full circle because history does not go in a cycle in the Torah. It moves forward. But what we have done is the sacred creation that God builds around the idea of 6 days of labor and a 7th of rest, a world that is blessed, a world that is very good, a world in which humans can dwell and are blessed, has to be recreated by we humans. That's what, in the Torah's eyes, Israel has been chosen for, to make a dwelling place for God by entering into this sacred relationship with the cosmos, to be God's partner. Now, I'm so glad I have a few more minutes because I want to share with you. Oh, Karen said, this reminds me of one of those Passover table songs. Indeed, because I think this was an oral tradition. I picture myself sitting with the master storyteller, and as a child, learning that phrase, kasher. I could pick kasher tziva Adonai et Moshe. I can picture the storyteller pausing and gesturing to us the phrase. Do you know what I mean? It's like, hear it. And we're hearing a 7. We do it 7 times because 7 is where it's at. That's how we do it. A nation of priests, that's the goal. A nation of priests that can create a dwelling place and serve the Creator. And so the language of the Torah simply recapitulates creation over and over again as we hear about this completion of this dwelling place for God. Now, there's a phrase that comes from the Talmud called being a partner with God, that humanity's task is to be God's partner. And it's a beautiful image, isn't it? We're supposed to be, this is an ancient Jewish metaphor. We're here on this world to be God's partner in the act of perfecting creation, in the act of making the world holy, in the act of making the world, just as God made us a world to dwell in, we need to make the world a world that God can dwell in. And so I found the source of that partner in creation phrase, and I found it beautiful. I want to share it with you. Beautiful. Okay, here it is. This is from the Talmud, from Tractate Shabbat. It's the tractate described. It's a really long tractate, and I have not studied all of it. But Rava said, and some say it was Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi who said, even an individual who prays on Shabbat evening must recite. In other words, even if you're alone, you have to say the Kiddush. Even if it's just you and a cup of grape juice or wine. Vayak'hel hashamayim va'aretz v'chol tzva'am, and the heavens and the earth were finished. Vayak'hel. Because Rav Hanuna said, anyone who prays on Shabbat evening and recites the passage of Vayak'hel, the verse doing so ascribes him credit as if he himself was a partner with the Holy One in the act of creation. That's the origin of the phrase, being partners with God. And it is stated, and now they do a wordplay, and the heaven and earth were finished, Vayak'helu. But you could read it not as Vayak'helu, but rather as Vayachalu. In other words, we finished. And so it is considered as though the Holy One and the individual who say this become partners and completed the work together. Shannon, you raised your hand. Would you like to say something?
Oh, that was a mistake. Sorry.
Oh, no problem. So the very idea of being a partner with God, as it arises from the rabbinic tradition, is in the context of working and resting, acknowledging the fulfillment and the beauty and the completeness of creation along with God. Our recognition of that completeness, essentially, God needs us, as it were, to be part of that perception. If we don't stop on Shabbat, stop everything we're doing, and contemplate the wholeness and glory of creation, if we don't take that 7 and make it the heartbeat of our lives, we're not participating in God's cosmos the way God hoped we would. And so we are partners in creation from that phrase in the Talmud. And then I found another, again, thanks to, where did I see this one? Also Rabbi Sachs. I'm having a great time with Rabbi Sachs. I'm going to read Karen's comment. Sunday is the first of Nisan, the first day of the first month, the day that the Mishkan was erected. That's right. It said on the new moon of the first month, and the first month in the Torah means Nisan, the month of springtime, was the day that the Mishkan was erected, and that's this Sunday. Thank you. Here's the last piece I want to share with you. Okay, so our passage says that Moses looked at everything that Israelites had made and he blessed them, remember? Just like it says, and God blessed the human beings, Moses blesses the children of Israel. Moses is fulfilling his role as kind of like agent of the divine. But nowhere does it say what the blessing is. And I have to share this with you because this was the blessing that we gave Rabbi Ellen last Shabbat. The Midrash, the rabbis, tell us what Moses' blessing is. And thus it is written in Exodus chapter 39 and 40, what we were saying. And when Moses saw all the work that they had performed, as the Lord had commanded them, thus did they do, that Moses blessed them, saying, now Moses didn't say, on the first day of the first month shall you set up the Mishkan. That's the next verse, Karen. So with what blessing did he bless them? He said to them, may it be God's will that God's Shekhinah repose upon the work of your hands. I love that blessing. So if we are trying to make a home for God, then Moses' blessing is that may your hands, as it were, be God's hands. May the work, may inspiration, may you be filled with divine inspiration as you build this world into a dwelling place for God. Olam chesed yibaneh, build a world that's made out of love. And then it says, and the people responded, and this is from Psalm 90, may the beauty of the Lord our God be upon us and establish the work of our hands for us. The work of our hands, establish it. And though this is not written in the Torah, says the Midrash, it can be discerned from the writings where it says, may your works be beheld by your servants and your glory by their children. We haven't studied Midrash in its primary text so much. So yeah, you're not that familiar with the way they talk, but this is, explicated. A better translation was it can be discerned or pulled out from the writings, even though I know it doesn't say this in the Torah, but it says it. So May the beauty of the Lord our God be upon us and establish the work of our hands upon us. The work of our hands, establish it. Okay, I squeezed in most everything I wanted to tell you today. and I like the way it paints a picture of like this really close, fine reading of the text that leads us to these big organizing concepts of the Torah, mostly around Shabbat, and then this idea of being God's partner, and then that lifetime of contemplation. How am I going to be God's partner in making this creation everything it was meant to be? How am I going to make it a place where God would want to come visit? Because God made us this beautiful place to live. Okay, thank you so much.